Well, good afternoon, everyone. First, I want to thank the community advocates who are here today, as well as the Victim and Witness Program in Lancaster County for joining us. I also want to thank the team at the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency for helping to organize today's event. I also want to take a moment to recognize the survivors and victims who are here today. Your voices are so important. Thank you for speaking up and speaking out and turning your pain into purpose. I am so proud to serve as Pennsylvania's Lieutenant Governor, but I also have this distinct honor of serving as the chairman of the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency. And through that role, I've been working to reduce gun violence and help making Pennsylvania communities safer. I was a teenager living in my small community of McKeesport in southwestern Pennsylvania when an act of gun violence came to my neighborhood. That changed my life forever and put me on a trajectory towards public service. And I've been working on this issue for nearly 2 decades. And I've met countless survivors and family members who've lost loved ones due to the epidemic of gun violence. In the aftermath of a shooting, an act of violence, or another crime, victims experience devastating mental, physical, emotional, and financial impacts that echo throughout their lives. Victims and survivors deserve to be seen, heard, and most importantly, supported. And that's what the governor and I's budget does. In this year's budget, we proposed a $5 million investment into the Victims Compensation Assistance Program, which PCCD administers. This funding will set the Victims Compensation Assistance Program, what we call as VCAP, on a more stable course to ensure that crime victims continue to receive the support they need and deserve from the Commonwealth. The program provides financial assistance for expenses such as medical bills, counseling, funeral costs, crime scene cleanup, relocation, and other costs which may burden folks who are already under extraordinarily difficult circumstances. As you'll hear in a bit from Melissa Coleman, this program can make all the difference in the aftermath of a traumatic loss. Her story illustrates why this program is so vital. After losing a child to gun violence, the last thing a parent should have to think about is how am I going to pay for a proper funeral? After an injury caused by an abusive partner, the last thing a survivor should have to think about is how will I afford my medical bills? And after experiencing a sexual assault, the last thing a survivor should have to think about is how am I going to pay for the counseling to help me cope with this trauma? All of these costs and more are covered by VCAP and help ease the financial burden placed on victims after a crime. Over the past 5 years, PCCD has paid more than 76,000 claims, totaling more than $65 million in expenses. Individuals across all 67 counties have received assistance through this program. Turning our back on victims is not an option. It's not an option that the governor and I are willing to accept, and neither should you. Our budget and our proposed investment of $5 million will help heal families, lessen their burdens, and save lives. Now, I'd like to turn things over to Pennsylvania's victim advocate, Suzanne Estrella. Thank you.
Thank you to the Lieutenant Governor for bringing attention to this important service for crime victims. The Office of Victim Advocate is the state agency with the duty and the authority to advocate for the individual and collective rights of all crime survivors. We help crime survivors navigate through criminal justice systems and ensure their rights are upheld and centered throughout the process. We work diligently to help crime survivors find pathways to hope, healing, and resiliency. Most often, crime survivors connect with our office after an individual has been sentenced to a state correctional facility. We provide advocacy and support through the parole process and the clemency process. We provide notification of offender movements in and around state correctional facilities to support the needs of safety for crime survivors. We advocate to ensure that all rights afforded to crime victims through the Bill of Rights are upheld, and when a violation occurs, we work within systems to secure appropriate remedies. At OVA, we work hard to create pathways to hope, healing, and resiliency. We look for ways to support crime prevention efforts like our Address Confidentiality program. And we offer restorative justice programs like our Victim Offender Dialogue program and the Inmate Apology Bank. We hold trauma recovery conferences for survivors of sexual assault. We manage a Resilient Voices speaker program. We offer online support groups for trauma recovery and for survivors of gun violence. We also provide training and technical assistance to service providers and allied professionals. At OVA, we occupy a unique space. We're allowed to see how long the impact of crime can be present with an individual, a family, and a community. Most of us cannot even imagine what it feels like to live in a space that requires crime scene cleanup. Or can you even imagine suddenly, unexpectedly, needing financial resources to bury a loved one as a result of gun violence? But for the citizens of the Commonwealth that face those devastating realities, victims' compensation is a lifeline. It is the law in Pennsylvania that crime victims have the right to be restored to pre-crime economic status. Victims' compensation administered by the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency makes that right a reality. The Office of Victim Advocate supports the funding in the budget proposed by the governor as reflected in Senate Bill 1060 and House Bill 2324 that will stabilize the fund and ensure that the dollars are available at the critical times of need for crime survivors. At the heart of all we do at OVA, we seek to elevate the voices of crime survivors, to always acknowledge the humanity present in every act of crime. With that in mind, it is my pleasure to introduce to you Melissa Coleman. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. Anytime that I get called to come and speak about victim and witness, I will do that. I didn't write anything, but I want to speak from my heart because that's all I can do. Just imagine being a victim of a crime and you don't have life insurance on your loved one, and you have a bill that says $10,000. It wasn't no problem for victim witness to come in and help us out. And my family, I mean, you're dealing with the loss of a child. My son was 18 years old. He was murdered in the prime of his life, just graduating from high school. And if we didn't have the funds from victim and witness, it would have been very devastating on top of being devastated. So I'm here to speak to you all and to make sure that you hear from a person who benefited from this and ask you to continue funding this program. I know other parents who have also benefited from victim and witness, and it's very necessary. And before my son had got killed, my husband and me were attacked in our house, and he also benefited from victim and witness. It paid for his loss of wages and medical bills and the counseling and all kinds of things that we needed at the time because he was the sole provider, and when he was hurt, there was no income coming in. So this is a very good program, and I'm asking you to look at me as a mother who lost a child. There's just no reason that there shouldn't be no funding for this program. You're talking about a whole state of people, and with the crime going up and young people getting killed, this is needed more than ever. There's a lot of young mothers out here who are struggling, who don't have insurance, and I know a lot of people would say, well, why don't you have life insurance? But there's a lot of people who are struggling to make bills, and you have to choose if it's going to be your life insurance policy or if it's going to be your rent or your electric bill. So this program really was beneficial. Even to this day, I still hear from Deanna, and she's been a great help for us, a great support. And so anytime that I could come here and just speak a word of encouragement on why this is needed, I have no problem doing that. I thank you for your time. Please welcome Deanna.
Good afternoon. Thank you for supporting the efforts of PCCD, Governor Shapiro, and Lieutenant Governor Davis to assure continued support for crime victims in our Commonwealth. Now, I'm fortunate to lead the team of great victim advocates in Lancaster County Victim Witness Services, which is part of the Office of the District Attorney. And Victims' Compensation, or VCAP, is a valuable resource for the victims we serve. Our colleagues at Domestic Violence Services, the YWCA, the Children's Alliance, also rely on this essential resource for victims, in addition to our local hospitals, who file many claims for forensic rape exams. And thanks to collaborative efforts of stakeholders, VCAP is now more well known today than it has been. But that, of course, means the fund has to be secure. So what does it mean when I say VCAP? Well, every year, we have the honor to assist families such as Melissa's. About an average of a dozen homicides happen in Lancaster County every year. And while you may think of homicides when I say VCAP, I'd like to tell you about a couple other scenarios that are very common in the claims that we file. DUIs are among the most common crimes, and they cause much financial hardship for victims. On your way home from work, imagine you're hit by an impaired, unlicensed, and uninsured driver. This happens all the time. And you're spared, fortunately, major injuries and end up with just a broken arm. So it doesn't sound like that big of a deal. However, you work in a factory. So this means you can't work for several weeks. And like many families, you live paycheck to paycheck. And so they depend very much on your income. You're very concerned about losing your housing, losing your job, because your sick days are exhausted in the first couple weeks of your leave. The stress of the situation causes great trouble at home, and you're starting to feel depressed. Your auto insurance covers your medical bills, but not your lost wages and not counseling. Here's another example. Burglaries happen a lot. And imagine now if you're at home sleeping and someone breaks into your house. You own your home. You saved for it, fixed it up, made it your own, the house where you thought you would raise your children. Suddenly, the sense of security you had in your home is gone. And now you have trouble sleeping, and your children are no longer able to sleep in their own beds. You have some insurance for counseling, but it's a high deductible. And there are many, many other crimes which cause similar financial hardship. While criminal and juvenile offenders are ordered to pay restitution, this occurs once a case is completed and payments are made over time. Well, victims need financial restoration now. Bills have to be paid, wounds need to be tended, memorial services need to be planned, and counseling needs to begin now. As victim service providers, we must offer assistance to victims before their bills are sent to collections, before they are evicted or unemployed, and before they are paralyzed by the emotional trauma. Without VCAP, we are unable to help when the help is needed most. Fortunately, the VCAP program in Pennsylvania is among the best in the nation and has become a well-known resource. This also means the fund must be secure. This proposed transfer will enable us to provide victims and their families with this critical service, and I thank you very much for your support. I'd like to introduce Gabriella Romeo from PCAR.
Yes. Good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me to speak today. My name is Gabriella Romeo. I am the Public Policy Director with the Pennsylvania Coalition to Advance Respect, and I am honored to be with you today. Since 1975, the Pennsylvania Coalition to Advance Respect, also known as PCAR, has worked to eliminate all forms of sexual violence and advocate for the rights and needs of sexual assault victims. We are a coalition comprised of rape crisis centers that serve all 67 counties of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Together, we advocate for expanded rights and options for victims and partner with community members to strengthen sexual assault prevention in every community. April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. Throughout the month, we have united to learn, share, and take action to prevent sexual violence. We can all take steps to make others feel safe and help if they are sexually abused or harassed. We can share information about options and where to find local rape crisis centers. Our goal is to create communities where being a good neighbor is the norm, setting boundaries is celebrated, and holding people who cause sexual harm responsible is the standard. Every 68 seconds, an American is sexually assaulted, and every 9 minutes, that victim is a child. In Pennsylvania, in 2022-2023, PCAR's network of Rape Crisis Centers served 29,169 people. For the 2022-23 fiscal year, 19,221 hotline calls were answered. As an organization that relies on public funds, it is imperative that adequate funding be made available for survivors of sexual violence. Given that the estimated lifetime cost of rape is $122,461 per victim, every little bit helps to combat this public health crisis. You are not alone. Help is available. Rape Crisis Centers provide confidential counseling and support to children, adults, and community members impacted by sexual abuse and assault in every county in Pennsylvania. 24/7 free, confidential help is available through the statewide hotline 1-888-772-7227. It's a lot of twos and sevens, but it takes courage to come forward and get a forensic rape exam. For many survivors, a forensic exam is a difficult but necessary part of an emergency crisis response immediately following an assault. These exams are at no cost to survivors because of funding from Victims' Compensation Assistance Program, VCAP. It is a vital resource for survivors, ensuring they can seek immediate medical care and not worry about payment. Forensic rape exams are the highest payout under VCAP. Sexual assault counseling claims increased by 123% from 2022 to 2023. Forensic rape exam claims and sexual abuse are in the top 5 crimes paid by VCAP in 2023. As we continue to work to eliminate sexual violence, survivors deserve adequately funded resources. This includes both funding for VCAP and sexual assault services provided in the community by Rape Crisis Centers. Rape Crisis Centers have not had a meaningful increase in 5 years. Governor Shapiro's proposed $5 million investment into Pennsylvania's Crime Victims Compensation Fund in the 2024-25 budget presents an opportunity to support survivors of sexual violence. This proposed infusion of state funding will assist in ensuring sexual violence survivors will receive the care and support they need and deserve. In addition to the increase in the crime victims compensation, PCAR is also asking for a $5 million increase in the Department of Human Services rape crisis line item. In the time it's taken for this speech, statistically, there are 3 new adult survivors of sexual assault. It is because of this we urge legislators, community members, and all Pennsylvanians to support a $5 million investment in VCAP in the 2024-25 state budget. Now it is my pleasure to introduce Deanna Dyer.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Deanna Dyer, and I'm honored to serve as the Policy Director at the Pennsylvania Coalition Against Domestic Violence. In my nearly 2 decades doing this work, it has become increasingly evident to me that what survivors and victims have been telling us all along is unequivocally true. Legal remedies, yes, are essential, but alone, they're insufficient to address the various challenges that victims and survivors of domestic violence experience every day. Most of us here know that domestic violence is about power and control. It's about one abusive partner gaining and maintaining power and control over their intimate partner. And 99% of the time, financial or economic abuse is a tactic of that power and control that's used to perpetuate that abuse. A lack of financial security and economic self-sufficiency is the #1 reason that victims and survivors state they're either unable to leave an abusive relationship, or once they've already left, they return to that abusive relationship because of that economic dependence. Survivors can't break free of that abuse and begin to heal if they can't afford their medical bills, if they lost days or even weeks of work because of the abuse that they've experienced, or worse yet, if they lost their job entirely because of the abuse that they've experienced. They can't break free from that abuse and be expected to heal if they don't have access to safe, stable housing. The Victims' Compensation Assistance Program is a lifeline to victims and survivors to be able to rebuild their lives after the traumas of abuse. Advocates at PCADV's network of 59 local domestic violence service providers count on this program to empower survivors to be able to take control of their lives. This is one of many tools that they can offer to victims who are seeking safety and self-sufficiency. VCAP funds can help survivors by paying for things like counseling, medical bills, or even changing the locks on a survivor's home so that they can stay safe. Many victims, though, don't know that this resource exists, and advocates serve as a critical nexus point to inform them of this resource and to help them navigate the system. But domestic violence programs themselves are at a tipping point, nearing a financial crisis that threaten the ability for them to keep their doors open and welcome survivors who are fleeing life-threatening violence. Survivors can't rely on our federal government to fix VCAP funding, and they can't afford to wait another year for our state to invest in domestic violence services. It's time for the Pennsylvania legislature to step up and to invest in domestic violence victims and survivors. PCADV strongly supports the Shapiro-Davis administration's proposed $5 million investment into the Pennsylvania Crime Victims Compensation Fund. And it's critical that the legislature additionally increase funding for domestic violence services in the state budget by $8 million this year. The consequences of not investing in these services and not investing in the lives of victims and survivors will be felt throughout the communities across the Commonwealth. But if we come together to support victims and survivors of domestic violence and invest in their future, we can build a Commonwealth where all survivors and all Pennsylvanians can live healthy, safe, rewarding lives, free from not only intimate partner violence, but all forms of violence and oppression. Thank you. And it's my distinct pleasure to turn it back over to the Lieutenant Governor.
Well, thank you so much, and I want to please give a round of applause for all the speakers who joined us here today. Would be happy to take any questions if there are any, but that pretty much concludes today's program. Thank you. Oh, yeah.